Welcome back to another video. Let's get right into it. Here we go.
Superhero comics, none have gone through more trials and tribulations than Peter Parker's Spider-Man.
Dude, he's always getting put through the ringer.
Dude, it's just a thing at this point where, writers are just like, oh, I'm gonna write Pete, he has to suffer. Like, they think he's like Daredevil. Just make Pete's life a living hell all the time.
It's not a Spider-Man story unless he's like eating 24/7.
And, most of that stuff is not Pete's fault. But the stuff we're gonna talk about today is. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Thomas.
I'm Merlin.
Together, we are the Comic Lads, and today we're talking about what are Spider-Man's greatest failures.
And before we get into it, guys, you know the dealio. Question of the week. What do you believe is Spider-Man's greatest failure? Like we said before, there are so many to choose from, it's almost like comical at this point.
Yeah, you could Today, we're going to be talking about what we think are the big four. But before we get into it, guys, make sure to like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already.
Join the lads.
Become a fellow comic lad.
Okay, guys, we boiled it down to 4 of the worst failures. Getting into number 4, and I gotta just say, looking at this list, like, I can't help but laugh. Because it's hysterical. It is hysterical. But we're kicking off the list with, of course, the infamous One More Day storyline.
Oh my god.
Where he sold his marriage with MJ to Mephisto, aka the devil.
To save his fucking 1,000-year-old dying aunt.
I know. Not only can comic writers not let go of Aunt May, but neither can Peter.
Editorial at Marvel seems to think that Pete getting married to MJ makes Pete feel older. But the fact that Aunt May is still alive makes him feel older, bro. She's like 100.
I know.
Can we just let her go?
She's ancient.
Clearly, Pete can't let her go. Pete goes to literally everyone in the Marvel universe asking for help to save Aunt May because she's like in a coma. He goes to Reed, I'm pretty sure. Reed can't help her, which is shit.
Yeah, I don't buy it.
Goes to Doctor Strange, who can't help her, which is bullshit.
Definitely.
And then he talks to God. He talks to the one above all, and he's like, please. And God's like, dude, it's just her time.
Oh my god.
And the one person that can, quote unquote, help him is Mephisto, like you said, the devil. And he's like, hey, I'll help your aunt, but I want your marriage. And Pete's like, sounds good.
Take it.
It boggles the mind. Like, how could you ever make this choice? You know who pissed Aunt May would be if she knew he made this choice?
Yeah.
She would slap the shit out of him.
It is incredibly, honestly, it's selfish.
Extremely.
And I know on the flip side of it, it's almost like selfless because he's giving up his marriage to save his aunt. But it's like no one on any side of this besides you wants this.
Yeah, and everyone is telling him like it might just be her time, but he doesn't want to have like another Uncle Ben on his conscience, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's not his fault.
You know, it's not only a failure to himself that he lets this happen, it's also a failure to the fans and readers because this leads to all the most heinous shit that's been happening in comics in the last few years.
No, like this is the moment that we can trace everything back to where everything went wrong with Spider-Man.
It might not even be like on the top greatest failures of Spider-Man. It might be in the top greatest failures in comics.
100%.
It's ruined Spider-Man in the last few years.
It absolutely has. And I know that, Amazing Spider-Man still remains usually the best-selling book at Marvel, but it's because the readers have been like shackled to just keep buying it to find out what horrible shit is going to happen to Pete next month.
Yeah. Essentially, if you've read any modern Spider-Man comic book and you don't like something about it, most likely it could be traced back to this moment.
But guys, that's just number 4. Number 3, we're talking about the time that he punched a woman to death.
I used to spend dozens of hours every single week proofreading. I was constantly fixing run-on sentences, unclear.
This is crazy, okay? I didn't even know this until I recently read it in the last couple of years.
Yeah, dude, it's so bad.
And when it happened, it was kind of like, there's been very few times in comic history where I've read something and it catches me so off guard.
It just shocks you to your core.
That I'm like, I need to reread the last few pages and be like, wait, when did this happen?
Yeah.
What just happened?
You're not really expecting a moment like that in just, a random issue of Spider-Man from the 80s.
It's extremely dark.
It's fucked.
Yeah, getting into a bit of the context about it. This is actually a fun little team-up story between him and the Wolverine.
Yeah, super fun.
Super fun team-up story, where basically, it's shown in this story that Wolverine has this person he cares about a great deal who has wronged the mob. And this girl knows that there's no way out. So she essentially asks Wolverine to kill her.
As like a mercy killing.
A mercy killing, exactly, so she doesn't have to endure like weeks and months of torture and all that horrible stuff. Throughout the entire entire storyline, Spider-Man and Wolverine keep butting heads, and Wolverine keeps like throwing him around, basically like daddying up on him. And they're in a confrontation, and Spider-Man thinks it's over, and as he's turning away, someone grabs him, and he thinks it's Wolverine. So he turns with all of his might to like one-shot KO Wolverine and get him off his back. He puts his hand through this silhouetted figure, and it's revealed to be this girl. So Spider-Man's actually like bodied someone, dude.
He like caves in her whole chest with one punch.
Exactly.
She just dies in Logan's arms.
And it's insane. And, you know, the argument can be had of, okay, well, she was gonna die any way you cut it, whether it's the Mob, Wolverine, or Spider-Man.
Yeah, but it's fucked.
It is insane.
It's brutal. You know
Yeah.
how strong Spider-Man is?
Well, it's Spider-Man, and he's also punching what he thinks is
Wolverine.
is an adamantian skeleton.
Is 400 pounds of adamantium.
Exactly. So he puts everything into it, and of course, she is obliterated and dies.
Obliterated.
I feel like this has been forgotten to some degree in recent years.
Big time, yeah.
But back then, if you're following those issues and the ones that follow that initial moment, he's completely torn up about it.
It's a good point that you brought up, that it feels like a lot of people have forgotten about it. Because I feel like us as big fans of Spider-Man, we go through our lives before finding out about this comic being like, Pete's never killed anyone. Oh no, you fucking murked this girl.
In a way, I'd like to think that it kind of reaffirms what his mission is, who he wants to be as Spider-Man, as someone who always saves. Because, you know, Spider-Man was born out of the tragedy of Uncle Ben and all that, you know, not wanting his actions to lead to anyone else's death ever again, and that's his responsibility. You know, with great power comes great, all that stuff. And when it happens like this, he realizes like, oh shit, this power is a huge responsibility. Like, I just one-shot KO'd, well, not even KO'd, killed this person. So it is a major failure.
Absolutely, and guaranteed
I feel
after
like
that,
if
he's pulling his
Spider-Man's
punches
gonna-
way more.
That's actually a great point,
everybody
because
has.
in a lot of comics, especially
I know
recently,
Batman has.
even with the whole Superior Spider-Man arc, Doc Ock in Pete's
He killed
body
people.
literally states, I never knew he had the strength. Like, he never displayed this level of strength. He must have been pulling his punches. And maybe this could be even something that is tied to that.
Okay, guys, but moving on to number 2, we're talking about the death of Gwen Stacy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we could have made a list like this and not mention it, or it not be at the top, or at least near the top.
Definitely not. It still haunts Spidey. To this day, he still carries this guilt in his heart.
Definitely, and I think it is like a tragedy that, like you said, daily dictates his actions and how he handles situations and what he strives for.
Absolutely. And obviously, you know, if you're really talking about it, the death of Gwen Stacy is really at the fault of Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. But I think we can attribute a lot of the fault to Pete simply because of how he attempts to save her. You know, she's plummeting off the Brooklyn Bridge at breakneck speed.
No, you did not. No, you did not. Oh my god.
And she's plummeting, and Pete's decision is like, yeah, I'm gonna fire like one rope to grab her. And, you know, it latches onto her, and she fucking... Maybe that wasn't the best course of
Yeah.
action to save her.
And I think also on top of that, it's not just that moment itself that's a failure. I think he also takes it upon himself that the overall situation of her being there in the first place is his fault, because he, you know, muddled the line a bit too much between Spidey and Peter. And on top of that, I think it reaffirms his desire to keep those lives so separate, to keep everyone safe.
Definitely. It for sure makes him regress in terms of, you know, how close he gets to people, how much he lets them in on his life. Because, you know, at the end of the day, what happens during the night Gwen Stacy died reaffirms his fears that if he gets too close to people, the villains will go after them to hurt him. And it's exactly what happens.
And since that point in time, you can see that he's always thinking about that aspect of his life and keeping people safe. And I think it's really funny because we're talking about the greatest failures of Spider-Man. And I think, like superheroes, you know, people in general are molded by not just their greatest successes, but I think even more so by their greatest failures. The night Gwen Stacy dies is such a pivotal moment in how he goes forward with his life as Spider-Man after this.
Absolutely. And like we've talked about it in the previous video in the past, it's like his death of Jason Todd, basically.
It is.
You know, that molds him into kind of a more jaded, experienced hero.
Okay, guys, but we are down to the number one greatest
Yeah, well, that was
failure.
crazy
It's a bit of
how
an
Jason
obvious
Todd
one, but
got
I think
famous
maybe some
back
people
to that.
might overlook it.
Yeah, okay, so guys, we're talking about the death of Uncle Ben, obviously. Now, I feel like you said, a lot of people would overlook this one as, you know, know, what we think is Spider-Man's greatest failure, but to Spider-Man, I think he still feels like this is his greatest failure.
I mean, Spider-Man wouldn't be Spider-Man without the death of Uncle Ben. Who knows where he would be? That's actually just, have they ever explored that?
Well, I mean, for sure they must have done it in like a shitty issue of What If, but also the current run of Ultimate Spider-Man by Jonathan Hickman, having only read the first volume, so I don't know if, you know, if Uncle Ben's bitten the dust yet in that universe. Uncle Ben's alive, and Pete's Spider-Man. He hasn't really had that loss to forge him into really being Spider-Man yet.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting too that Uncle Ben, without him, at the time Peter was on a bit of a power trip with his powers. You know, there's that like infamous statement of, you know, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
And he was heading down that track, and that's where the whole notion of great power comes great responsibility comes in. Because if you misuse your power and you do power trip, like a skinny, you know, 16-year-old, 15-year-old Peter was doing then with this whole dual life as the wrestler and all that, you can head down a really dark path. So it's almost like weird because his greatest failure with Uncle Ben's death, obviously we all know the story how he's kind of indirectly responsible for Uncle Ben's death.
Yeah, by letting the criminal go.
It's almost like so much good was born out of this tragedy. Not for Peter, obviously.
Definitely. But in you know, the fires of Uncle Ben's death was forged the greatest hero in the Marvel Universe.
Exactly.
For Pete, like we've read in Life Story, you know, he will never stop trying to save everyone because he couldn't save Uncle Ben. But I think if Uncle Ben had the choice to like go back and maybe like change where he was or save himself from dying, like he absolutely would not if he knew what Pete would become. I think he would give his life a million times over again.
Yeah, because this wasn't just the greatest failure on Peter's conscience and his whole career as Spider-Man. It might even be the greatest, I say greatest in quotation,
yeah,
but like moment of his life. You know what I mean? The most pivotal moment of his life.
It is. It made him into who he will always be.
Enough said. But that is our list, guys. Let us know in the comments below if you agree with it or if you have an alternative greatest failure. Like the video, it really helps us out, and we're the Comic Lads. See you next time.
Yeah, I think the best action is to not be friends with Spider-Man.